Ever felt like this dog when somebody assigns a Jira ticket to you to do a complex form? Yeah? You too? Well, let's talk about it. If you watched any of my other videos, you might have noticed that I really like to go in depth and explain how something works with these diagrams, and then actually jump into the code, and this video will be no different. So before we actually go into form handling, let's first understand the trip that the form takes from the client to the server. So the first thing that we need to understand here is that we have to gather the data on the client. How we can do that is either by using a form library or just providing HTML inputs and allowing the user to enter the information. That part is really up to you. And after you gather the information, you have to send it to the server somehow. Even though the code is in the same file, the boundary between the loader and the action and the actual React code is really big. You have to understand that even though the code is co-located, that doesn't mean it's co-located when it's deployed. So the loaders and actions run on a server, and your React client code runs on the client in the browser. So what this means is, whenever we submit a form, it has to go to a server. And how that works is, we have to serialize the data. So we have to serialize it and then send it to the server. And serialization is nothing more than turning the data into an appropriate format, because you can't just send, for example, numbers and booleans and everything else across the wire. You have to convert it to appropriate format and then send it. For example, if we want to send it as JSON, we have to turn it into a JSON object. And form data takes only two kinds of values. It's either strings or files, which means you have to turn every other type of value into a string and then send it to the server. So for example, let's imagine we have an object that has a number in it. So we have to turn this number here that's of type number into a string, and then we can send it to the server. And this is basically what serialization means. So we basically turn all the types into strings and then send them to the server. And then when they hit the server, they're given to an appropriate action or a loader, depending if it's a get or a post request. And then, because everything is a string inside of form data that we've gotten, we have to somehow deserialize the data. And how do we do that? Is basically we turn all the keys back to what they were. So for example, if we sent a string number 1, we turn it back to a number, and so on and so forth. So basically we have to have some kind of mechanism that's going to turn our serialized data into the original type of data that we sent. So for example, we parse the JSON that we've gotten, we do something like a transformation on arrays or something like that, and then we get the raw data here. So when we get the raw data, we have to validate it on the server to make sure that the data we've gotten is correct. So for example, if our deserialization process is wrong, we might have expected an array, but we've gotten something else. For example, a string that looks like an array, but it's not. And after we validate the data, we can do something with it. So this process requires you to have some kind of validation. In today's tutorial, I'll use Zod, but you can do anything else. You can even not validate it if that's what you like and you like to live dangerously. And after we've validated the data itself, we have our valid data here. And then what we can do with this valid data is, on the action side of things, process it in some way that we can use the data to do something else. So for example, if we're updating the user information, we send it from the client to the server, we deserialize the information, we validate it, and then after we have the valid data, we do something in our action with it. For example, we store the updated information in a database, and then we send the response back to our client, and then the client handles the rest. So in this case, we can either redirect to a new page, or we can just return some JSON or whatever else, and then the client can handle it and show a toast or something like that. And that's our basic flow here. Because we'll be using React hook form today, it's really important to understand what part of this flow React hook form handles for us. So because React hook form at the time of filming is a client-focused library, it covers the validation and gathering of data on the client. This means that it covers this part, but it doesn't cover the rest of this here. So what we're gonna use today is a package called Remix Hook Form, which handles the following parts. It handles the serialization, so it serializes the data for you. It handles the sending of the data to the server. It handles the deserialization part. And then it also handles validation, so you can get to this part. And then after you've covered all of these parts, you're good to use this data for whatever you need it for. So now that we understand how this process works and how we will get to the valid data part, let's actually see that part in action. As you might have already guessed, we're going to be using Shadcn-UI for this. So the easiest way to install it is to just go to their documentation website, go to the installation part here, and after that you have frameworks, and obviously we want Remix. After we click on Remix, you can basically follow this inside of your Remix application, and after you're done with all the questions, and you can basically answer these questions to the CLI that they ask you, you install Tailwind after that by running this. You add this configuration inside of post.css config.js file. And after that, in remix config.js, you just add these two. And after you're done with all of that, you just add the link to the styles to the links function in your root tsx file. And that's pretty much it. And then you can just run this command without the button here to just see the list of all the components you can add to your project. You can select what you want to add and then go from there. For this tutorial, I'll be using mostly their components like input, select, checkbox, and so on. So it's really up to you what you want to use. I know that they have a form here component, and if you look at this, this uses a lot of things under the hood. You can go through it, but basically they use React hook form here and Zod, and how it works is basically they give you a lot of utilities on top of React hook form to handle your forms. You can go with this as well, but the main issue I have with this is that a lot of form components are controlled here, and I really don't like control components. I think that uncontrolled is the way to go, but it's really up to you. If you want to do control components, you can. But the only thing I would change if you install the form here is I would change the name of the main component from form if I go here and expand this. So I would change this to be called form provider, because this is not really a form component that submits the form. This is a form provider context that React hook form provides to you. So the naming is a little bit off here, and that's just something to keep in mind. But that's just really up to you, because if you look at their example, you can see that they use form here and then form here. And basically it's a little bit confusing because this is the form provider context and this is the actual form. So just keep that in mind. And now that we've installed Shadcn-UI into our project, let's go back and add whatever else we need. Alright, so if you followed the tutorial up to this point, the only other thing that you'll need to add to this is remix hook form. So you can just do that by just running npm install remix hook form, and it's going to install the latest version for you. I've already done it in this project, but you get the point. Now that we're done that, let's go to the fruit route here. And I've already set up a simple form for us, so we will basically be submitting our favorite fruit to the backend. We specify our name, we set the number of years we've been eating fruit, and basically we select our fruit and agree to the terms of service, and we submit the form. So if we go to the browser, we can see how it looks like, so let's switch right now. Alright, so here is our simple form here, and if we try to enter our name, we set the number of years we've been eating fruit, and then we select one of these. So I'll go with pineapple, and we accept the terms of service, and then we click login. This is already going to submit the information to our backend. So if I click this and go back to the VS Code, we will see that we've already made a post request with the data to the backend. Alright, so now that we're back in VS Code, I have prepared some code for us, and also you can see that the post request went in, and the name, the years, the fruit, and the terms were sent to the backend. And as you can see, the terms are on because that's how checkboxes work by default. And the years have been serialized into a string. So this is what I was talking about earlier when I said that the data gets serialized and sent to the server. So let's see how we can use Remix hook form to actually get a nicer backend data object, and also how we can use it to validate it on the front end and serialize it and send it to the backend. So I've prepared this ZOD schema here. It's nothing special. It just requires you to have the term set to true. The name has to be set, and so do the years and the fruit. And I've also created this resolver here, so it uses the result resolver from hook form, and we just give it that schema. And then what we're gonna do here is give this to the use remix form from remix hook form. And what this is gonna do for us is it's going to give us a handle submit function. And what we're gonna do here is we're gonna give it to our remix form. And what this is going to do behind the scenes is this will submit to the right method and action, and it's going to serialize the data for us in the format that we're gonna expect on the backend, and that we're gonna use utilities from Remix hook form to parse that data. So now that we've added the handle submit here, it's automatically going to submit all of the data serialized to the backend, and it's going to go into this action. So now that we have the front-end part done, we validate the data here, we submit to the right endpoint and serialize the data. We now need to deserialize it here. So what we're gonna do here is we're going to say await get validated form data from hook form, and we're gonna give it the request and the resolver. So there we go. And what this is gonna return are three things. So the first one is received values, the second one is errors, and the third one is going to be data. And how this works is, this is a discriminated union. So if there are any errors here, we're just gonna return them as JSON. And what this is gonna do is, it's going to return the data to the front end, and then the use remix form is going to automatically populate the form state with those errors. And what we're also gonna do is we're gonna return the received values. So if we want progressive enhancement here, what this is gonna do is if we receive the values and there's no JavaScript loaded, this will set this as the default values on the fields, and then it will act like the user submitted the values and he got the errors, but the inputs didn't clear. So this is also a utility from Remix hook form. And then after we're done with this, if there are no errors, we will have fully validated data here. And also I forgot that we need to type this. So this is going to be zod.infer type of schema, and then we close it here, and you hover over these. This is going to be a number, this will be a string, and also this will be a string here. And then what we can do with the data is we can, for this example, console log it, but in our examples we could use it to do something else with it. Alright, so in order for our form to work, I've added a couple of things. So the first thing is I've typed this hook to be of this schema, so the same as the backend one. And I've set the default values to be what they should be, so the name, the year, the fruit, and the terms. And what I've also done here is I'm watching for the terms so I can know if they're true or not. And what we're gonna do here is we're going to say register the name input because it's a normal text field. On blur of the other input, we're just gonna set the number of years to be the number. And on the select, we're gonna set on value change to set the value of fruit to whatever this value is. So whenever a user clicks on the select option, it's going to set that as the current fruit. And on the checkbox, whenever it's clicked, we're going to change the terms to whatever it wasn't before. So basically a toggle. And then we show the error here on terms if we have an error that's supposed to be shown. So let's see how that works in action. We have our form here. So if I enter my name, I say I've been eating fruit for 5 years, and then I select some fruit. So for example, bananas, and I don't accept the terms and I click login, I get this error. And if I accept this and log in again, this will be sent to the backend. And if we go back to VS Code, we can see that the endpoint was hit. And the most important thing is, name is a string, years is not a string anymore, it's been deserialized to be a number, and the fruit is banana. And this has already been validated by the resolver here. And it's valid, so it didn't go into the errors here. Which means that we have valid data at this point and we can do whatever we need to do with it. So that's the cool thing about Remix Hook Form. It gets you to that point where you have the valid data so much quicker, so you can move quicker. And a full disclaimer here, I'm the actual creator of Remix Hook Form, and I'm actually working to get this merged into React Hook Form. So in the near future, this might all be supported by React Hook Form itself, so you wouldn't even need to use this package. So if you're interested in that, you can check it out on their repository. But for now, you can just use Remix Hook Form to get things done quicker and easier. And this is it for today. We've actually handled forms, and we now know how to do form handling in Remix. And the cool thing about it is that this works for any form library. And if you want to roll your own, you can also do that. So the important thing to note here is you need to serialize the data, you need to deserialize it, and then validate it. And that's it for today. If you enjoyed the video, consider liking it and leaving some comments down below if you have any questions. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one. Bye!